out on their end. So we hope everything will run smoothly for this presentation. And yes, I am Eriks Garsvo and director of the Owyhee County Museum. I see some of my friends are in and watching tonight, so thank you. And let me share my screen then, and we'll get the show on the road. Here is, we'll take you back to Titanic here. And nice fly around the shipyard Titanic at the Discovery Center. All right, well, let's get on with the presentation then. So, birth of a legend, birth of a dream, and all began between J. Bruce Ismay and Lord Peary. And they had a dinner party at that house right there, that mansion there, and they discussed, now Ismay is the head of the White Star Line company. Lord Peary would be the company head of Harland and Wolff. So they met and they, over a dinner party, thought about, we need to make two ships that are bigger and better than the rival line Cunard, which was the Lusitania and the Mauretania were sailing the waters at this time. And they were the fast ships. They were big. They were the biggest ships in the world until Olympic was constructed. And they had 4 funnels. All 4 funnels were used. And so Ismay and them, they thought of, let's make something not so much as fast, but as more luxurious that will rival anything on the ocean today. And so they came up with 2 ships, ships 400 and 401. And they would name them after Titans and the Olympians. So Olympic would be number 400 and Titanic number 400 or 401. And these were the job numbers, 400, 401 at Harland and Wolff. Harland and Wolff was the company. Here they are in Belfast, Ireland. A picture here of them building the big slipways and the gantry overhead crane work to build the 2 largest ships in the world. The other shot here is the drafting department at Harland and Wolff. And this building still stands and has been renovated since the 100th anniversary. And there's a coffee shop in the center of the building, a little square coffee shop, and you can sit and read your book and all that. So they've restored the building, but back in 1912, every drawing, every pipe, electrical wiring was drawn out in this room. Thomas Andrews spent lots of time probably in that room there. Thomas Andrews was the master shipbuilder for Titanic. He took over after Alexander Carlisle stepped down after he had a disagreement with his son-in-law, I believe, something like that, family related. Alexander Carlisle, he was responsible for the ship safety system, such as watertight compartments, the lifeboats. While working on the liners, Carlisle had disputes with Lord Peary over the number of lifeboats. Carlisle wanted double the amount of boats that Titanic had. The Board of Trade at the time said, you know, well, the Board of Trade said, you guys are fine, and you have more than enough than we require. They had 20 lifeboats on Titanic, 2 collapsibles, say about 4 collapsibles, and the rest were standard wooden-sided boats, more than the Board of Trade required at the time. Now, lifeboats back then were not what they are today. The ship does not need to carry enough lifeboats for every passenger back then. The thought was you are sailing in a transatlantic shipping lane, lots of ships all the time, always near you, and can get to you if you were sinking. So these lifeboats were just ferry boats to get you to the next ship, and the next ship would come up and everything would be fine. So Carlisle says, but you know, the Board of Trade is wrong. We have a ship bigger than the Board of Trade has ever seen. We need more lifeboats. And his brother, maybe his brother Carlisle goes, it's going to clutter the deck. People are going to feel unsafe on an unsinkable ship. So he stormed out of the office, and Thomas Andrews took over. Now, Andrews is an Irish businessman, shipbuilder, managing director, the head of the drafting department, and he was also a naval architect. And he eventually became in charge of Titanic, and he would sail on Titanic for maiden voyage to make sure everything was perfect.
But he's giving me shit.
The first thing is, before they could build the largest ships in the world, they had to renovate the Belfast slipyard. So they took a couple slips and made into two large ones, built a huge overhead gantry so they could deliver steel wherever is needed during the construction. That alone, which is on your screen now, is that took 3 years to build itself. Complete renovation of the yard. When that was completed, then Olympic would be built first and Titanic would follow soon later. Construction started on Titanic on March 31st, 1909, at a cost of $7.5 million in 1912. So we're looking at about $400 million in today's money to build Titanic. This photo is right before Olympic was launched, and she's painted white. And that was done back then for the launch of the very first ship in a fleet. And that would show up better on black and white photography. And then someone had to repaint the whole thing black because it wasn't going to stay white very long. On May 31st, 1911, 20 tons of tallow, train oil, and soap aided her approximately 24,000-ton hull to slip into the water. It took a mere 62 seconds, and Titanic was afloat. The newspaper would quote the next day, "As though she were eager for baptism," the newsletter recounted. During the launch, she took with her one more worker who was in charge of the massive drag chains that slowed the Titanic down. During construction, Titanic took 8 lives. Now this photo here shows it just after slipping into the water. It's sitting high in the water. There is nothing inside this ship. It is completely empty. All that's there are the steel decks. I mean, nothing's in there. No woodwork, no electrical, no boilers, no bridge is not even built yet. No funnels are attached. So it just the hull is complete. She was then towed over to Fitting Out Dock. The largest dry dock in the world, of course, had to be dug for Titanic to be put together. Some of the shots here showing they're painting the ship here. They're putting lifeboats on. They're putting the funnels on. And the funnels on this photo, you can see they were painted on the ship. So again, a little catwalk over here was constructed on the 4th funnel and lowered up and down. And the men would sit here with buckets of paint and paint by hand the entire funnel. So what a job back then. And then here's the interiors. This is what it looked like when it arrived at Fitting Out Dock. This is the inside of Titanic, possibly, well, this could be somewhere near the smoking room, possibly, but yeah, very just bare steel. From this point on, she would be totally fitted in with all her fine appointments. Beautiful luxury of wood and plaster and all that would all be put in. She had 3 million rivets that held the hull together. She had 10,000 light bulbs. An electrolier chandelier in the lounge had already 49 light bulbs, and that is this one right here on the corner of your screen. That chandelier is out of the Olympic, when the Olympic was scrapped. The entire insides were auctioned off. So you have rooms of the Olympic that you can still go see, and those rooms are identical to Titanic. So we have that, things are identical, that electrolier chandelier there. She had 2,000 portholes, 9 decks, and 20 lifeboats with a capacity of 65 grown men per boat. Those boats were tested in the harbor in Belfast there with 65 grown workers. So just remember that for later in the presentation. The boilers, all that coal-fired boilers, here they are in the factory being taken out to the ship. She had 29 Scotch-type boilers, and there were 25 double-ended ones, 4 single-ended ones. All of them had 3 furnaces at each end. A total of 159 coal-burning furnaces heated the water that sent steam to the reciprocating engines. Each of those boilers weighed 100 tons. And it was estimated that in one day, 825 tons of coal a day had to be shoveled into those boilers to be fired up. And then here's a view. If we were slice the ship in half, we see the boilers, the boiler room and the decks above. So you would have a boiler room 6 and boiler room 5. Those boilers are double-ended, and those boilers vented up into one funnel, one smokestack. Then you would have another set of double-ended boilers in boiler room 6, 5, 4, 3, 4 and 3, and 2 and 1. So those are all the boiler rooms, and they would all connect into those 3 forward funnels there. Speaking of funnels, here they are bringing one of them out of the factory here. They were large enough, they were to have 2 steam locomotives driven through at the same time. They weighed 60 tons apiece, and with the funnels attached to the ship, Titanic would be a 17-story building as tall. Now, the 3 forward funnels on this ship are real. They're real. They work. They vent boiler rooms, all that coal smoke here. The very last one is an ornament. It's a dummy funnel. It doesn't do anything, but of course, the drafters told Ismay, they said, well, the Cunard lines have 4 funnels, and we thought your ship should have no less. And of course, it makes it look bigger. And the only thing that the 4th funnel did was vent excess kitchen fumes, steam, things like that. But in a way, you could go from the engine room straight up a ladder and look out the top of that 4th funnel there. The engine room. These are actual photos of the reciprocating engines being built at Harlan and Wolff. There was 2 side-by-side engines. You can see a person standing here. There's a person down here. They're huge. They're as tall as a 5-story building. And this is what it would look like. Some computer renderings here of the engine. Giant steam reciprocating engines. And how do they work? Well, let's take a look. So we've got a little animation here showing we've got the large piston, a medium piston, and a small piston rotating on a shaft, which would drive the propellers there. And a cutaway more for informational. You've got hot steam comes into the first big piston. Then steam comes, as it's cooling down, goes in the next piston, pushes that one down. And the steam cools again and goes into the 3rd piston, finally returning back into the pump section main, which is then condensed into water. Water sent back to the boilers to be re-steamed, and then back it goes. So that's kind of how these engines worked. And those engines drove the propellers. The Titanic had 3 large propellers. The 2 on the outside weighed 23, they were 23 feet tall, weighing at 38 tons of bronze, with the blades attached, bolted on, while the center one was cast of solid bronze and weighed about 17 tons, a little smaller. And here's a color shot of what they would look like. Now, these are bronze, so to this day, they are on the bottom of the ocean, shiny and clean. Bronze doesn't rust, and they'll probably be there forever and a day on the ocean floor there. Massive ship for 1912. So, Captain Edward Smith is our captain today. He was considered the millionaire's captain. This would be his last voyage, as he planned to retire after this voyage, after skippering this one. He started as a British merchant Navy officer. He served as the master of numerous White Star Line vessels, and in 1904, Smith became the Commodore of the White Star Line and was responsible for controlling its flagships. He successfully commanded the Baltic, the Adriatic, and the Olympic on its maiden voyage. For his stoicism and fortitude in the face of adversity, Smith became an icon of British stiff-upper-lip, spirit, and discipline. He was also considered the millionaire's captain, and he quoted right before Titanic sailed that I myself could not imagine what would make a ship founder. Modern shipbuilding has gone beyond that. He was confident as well as everybody else with the watertight doors, compartments. The ship itself is a lifeboat. When one door closes, water is isolated to a compartment and the ship stays afloat. Leaving port Wednesday at noon on April 10th, 1912, Titanic set sail for New York City. These pictures here show Titanic departing Southampton with 2,220 people on board. She is not full to capacity. Capacity would be around 2,400 people. From here, she would sail across, from here, she would blow her whistle. Titanic's whistle would be blown when she left port. And in 1998, the Titanic's whistle was brought up from the ocean floor, cleaned up, reassembled, and blown under low pressure air. They were afraid if they blew it with a high pressure steam that they would blow the whole whistle apart. So you're going to hear the whistle, this is the voice of Titanic, first blown with low pressure air, and then the tone will be changed so that we get a higher pitch because it was a steam whistle, and then finally with steam. That is the voice of Titanic. The last time someone heard that was in 1912, and the first time someone in it was 1998. So that's every time I hear that, it's very, very moving. So from Southampton, she sailed across the English Channel, arrived by sunset in Cherbourg, France. From here, of course, she's too big to fit into any port. So she was anchored off into the bay, and this tug here, Nomadic, this ferry, was used to bring out passengers to Titanic. Now, the Nomadic is the only White Star vessel still in existence today. It was saved because in Cherbourg for many years it was turned into a restaurant. It was then brought back to Belfast and restored right before the 100th anniversary. So you can see there's a photo of it. You can visit it. So only White Star vessels still afloat. Now in Cherbourg, one of the famous people that came aboard here would be Margaret Brown, as history would know her as the unsinkable Molly Brown. She was boarded here, returning to Denver, where she lived. And from here, after everyone was boarded, people were having dinner, they went to bed. Titanic rose anchor and sailed for Queenstown, Queenstown, Ireland. And people would awake the next morning in Queenstown, docked outside of port, and then more tugboats and ferries brought in the extra mail, luggage, and the last of the people, which would probably be more third-class folks coming on here. Now, mail was brought on. That is where we get the R.M.S. Titanic, Royal Mail Steamer. A contract was given to this ship to carry the official English mail across to New York. Otherwise, every ship back then was known as SS, SS Titanic, SS Olympic, no matter what, because SS means steamship. Everything was a steamship, so SS. Now, when your company got an award contract for the Royal Mail, you advertised with that. Royal Mail, R.M.S. Titanic, it was all over the place. So that's where we get R.M.S. or SS. She would raise anchor here. One person did get off the ship instead of continuing to New York, and that was Father Brown. Father Brown took that photo on the deck, looking down at that tugboat there. And luckily he did. He got on Southampton, he got off in Queenstown, and he took photos through that part of the voyage. And those are the only photos we have of the ship, on board the ship during that time. Here's the dock that all the people would have walked onto to get on the ferry boat out to Titanic. It's still there in Queenstown. And that is the very last photograph that we have of the Titanic. The next time you would see that ship would be 73 years later, 2.5 miles down on the bottom of the ocean floor. Titanic's first day out at sea was on Friday, April 12th. Her top speed was 24 knots, which is around 27 miles per hour. 6 days would take the ship to cross the Atlantic at 2,890 miles to go. So since we've got nothing to do for 6 days, we might as well take a look around the ship. And we're going to start here on the boat deck. And the blueprint drawing shows you the boat deck here, the very front of the boat, the bridge area. My mouse here is showing you that's the bridge. And all of this area here is crew only, officers promenade. You are not allowed in that area. After that, you have all first class promenade, boat deck area. A large section of the boat deck was for first class. After that, you had engineers promenade, which means the crew, the engine workers. They had very little a little piece of deck. And then everything behind that was for second class only. The third class people had the bow and the stern. And that was it. That's all they got. They did not get to go up the boat deck. So this colorized photograph of Titanic is actually the second class area of the boat deck there. After you took a stroll on the boat deck, we would come into, if you of course were first class here, we would come into the main key feature of the ship, and that is the grand staircase. And that is an actual photograph of the staircase there in Titanic. And now, without further ado, we are going to step back in time and experience Titanic. Of course, music was always playing from somewhere in third class, drifting up from the reception room. You came in off A deck there. Actually, this is A deck promenades outside those windows. You were greeted by a giant oak staircase, a large cherub in the center holding the torch there, and above a large glass dome. Let's take a climb up the staircase now. And in front of us, we see the clock with the two angels, honor and glory, crowning time. Walking up to the edge of the staircase here, and if we were to look down, you would see all the way down to F deck, 5 decks below. If you were to look up, you would see the magnificent wrought iron and glass dome with natural daylight shining through. At night, electric light illuminated the dome. Going down a couple landings onto C deck, we find ourselves here looking at the purser's office or inquiry office. That office there in front was where you could find out who was on the ship, guest lists, a passenger list. You could store your diamonds and jewels and money or whatever you don't want in your cabin for safekeeping in the purser's office. Now let's take a look at the C deck clock. Every landing had a clock and tell you where you are, C deck, D deck, E deck. So there's the clock, there's the C deck. There's the actual piece from the ship in C deck. And this is on display at the Las Vegas exhibition, currently at the Luxor Hotel. Now, if you didn't want to walk the staircase, that's fine. You had a brand new thing on a ship was the lifts, or what we call the elevators. This was the first ship to have lifts, and they were located behind that grand staircase. They took you from A deck to E deck, 4 decks down, and they were used primarily by the women as they were more fragile back then. So they had benches in there to sit. Men, of course, we took the stairs, but we did have, they had elevators. Now on D deck, we come down another landing to D deck, and we see the D deck reception room. And in the corner of your screen, we have those doors and a gate over that. That is the first class entrance to the ship. As first class, we would have came into that room, welcome aboard. We would have come into this room, seen those elevators, come around to the front and seen this. This is the D deck landing of the grand staircase here. The large reception room with palms, carpeted flooring, a large candelabra in the center with gold leafing inlay. Beautiful room with full stained glass windows. 2 grand pianos in this room where the string quartet could stand around and music could be played during tea time and dinner and breakfast, and first class had music to do everything to. And then if we proceed forward from this piano to those doors and those glass windows, we look into the dining room. which we'll go in there shortly. If we turned around, let's say you're looking this way now, we're going to turn around, look behind us. This is the D-deck reception room. Now, as I mentioned, full stained glass windows. And yet here we are down 4 to 5 decks from the boat deck. So we have full windows with light, yet there's no way we can have a full window. What they did was they put double portholes along the side of the hull from this room all the way through the dining room. And if you are open one of those stained glass windows, there's a double portholes. Lets the light in at the daytime, and at night, again, we had electric light bulbs to illuminate the beautiful stained glass windows. The very last landing on the grand staircase was E-deck. It was a little simpler, a little narrower, but that was the very last ornate landing there. And if you were on the very last ornate landing on E-deck and you were to go to the corner, the very, tuck into the corner, look straight up, there's the glass dome all the way up 5 decks above you. The dining room. This large dining room here could seat over 500 people in immense luxury of a Jacobean style, located on the D-deck. This placement here was between the 3rd and 4th funnel, right dead center midship. They put it there for one good reason. It was going to be the smoothest ride available on Titanic. So in rough seas, you didn't really feel the rock of the ship. Very smooth. So very large room. And literally, actually, this room you can see from one side of the ship to the other side. And it had a linoleum floor. The grand staircase had a linoleum floor. Pretty much all the ship had linoleum tile floor. And linoleum was it. If you had linoleum in 1912, you were the cream of the crop. You were ultra rich. This was class. They were going to put marble on the grand staircase. At the last minute, they put linoleum in because it was better than marble. So don't make fun of your grandma's kitchen now, okay? Linoleum is class. In the dining room, well, let's see. For dinner, I'll just give you a short rundown. We could see oysters. We could see cream of barley. We could see salmon, filet mignon, sauteed chicken, lyonnaise, vegetables, lamb in mint sauce, roast duckling, applesauce, sirloin of beef, chateau potatoes, creamed carrots, boiled rice, Waldorf pudding, chocolate and vanilla eclairs, and French ice cream. Oh, it was good to be rich back then. They ate delicious food. And they had a lot of it. They had 7,500 pounds of bacon. They had 1,000 sweetbreads, 10,000 pounds of sugar, fish, 11,000 pounds of fish, 40,000 eggs, 20,000 bottles of beer, spirits at 150 bottles, and wines at 1,500 bottles. They were sailing across the ocean right there, floating across. And this slide also shows you some kitchens, all the crafts and pots hanging from the ceiling there, and an actual bottle brought up from the wreck site of Titanic there. So what else could you do on Titanic if you were first class? You could check out the Turkish Baths. This suite had a steam room, a hot room, a temperature room, toilets, and a cooling room. There were also ultra-modern innovation, the electric beds that applied heat to the body using electric lamps. This was exclusive to first class only. Located on F deck, next to the swimming bath, and it was designed in a Moorish style with service waiters and heating blankets. Passengers could purchase a ticket on C deck for the baths. They were segregated by gender, available to the women from 5 to 9, between 9 a.m. to noon, and men from 2 to 6. The charge was 4 shillings, which is $27 per person in today's money. After the Turkish Baths, you could take a dip in the pool. Here's an actual photo of the pool. The pool was located on F deck above boiler room number 5. The placement here was very crucial because it was right above the boiler room so that they could heat the water easily. The pool was filled with salt water as soon as the ship was out in the mid-Atlantic. They pumped it right in and heated it right up there. The pool was open to women from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and to men from 2 until 6. Again, passengers bought a ticket at the purser's office. Now we're going to take a little dip into the pool, about only 5 feet deep or so, not too bad. Titanic was the very first ship to have a swimming pool, and it didn't even come with a slide. Darn. They also had showers because you have to wash the salt water off here, and changing rooms as well. Another place that men could visit, this was exclusive for men only, was the smoking room. In order to recreate the same atmosphere of a gentleman's club, the room was decorated with dark mahogany paneling, inlaid with mother of pearl and richly carved. Numerous stained glass windows were installed within the paneling, which were illuminated from A-deck promenade outside. Like the lounge of the ship, the ceilings and windows were raised above the level of the boat deck, which gave the room a larger feel. So you could see the arched windows above the rectangular windows. That's the boat deck. Rectangular windows are A-deck. The floor was laid with blue and red linoleum tiles, and plaster ceiling was molded with plaster medallions. And in the center of the far back wall was a Norman Wilkerson painting right there above the fireplace called Plymouth Harbor, which hung over the coal-burning fireplace in white marble. This was the only real fireplace on board. All others were electric heat. Tables and chairs dotted the room, and these tables were special. They had raised edges to keep your drink from spilling in rough weather. Men were still sitting here playing and drinking when the Titanic struck the iceberg. The lounge, first class lounge, very center of the ship, up on the A-deck as well area, raised roof over the promenade. Here's a color rendering of that room with that electrolier chandelier in the middle there. The room was intricately carved in English oak paneling with intimate motifs of musical instruments were the dominant feature of the room. Bronze sconces and large rounded mirrors were installed throughout. It was open daily from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. and was used primarily for socializing, playing cards, reading a book, taking tea, coffee, and light refreshments before and after dinner. Adjacent to the first class lounge was the reading and writing room. Of course, here, as it said, reading and writing, you could write a letter home, read a book, in a beautiful wing of the lounge. Now, all of these pictures you're seeing right now, folks, are coming from Titanic Honor and Glory. It's a game that's been in production for 10 years, and hopefully soon we'll have all of this, 100% of the ship explorable. Every room will be a true recreation of the ship in a VR capability tour mode of the Titanic. So it's been worked on with historians and photographs, and what you're seeing is what would have been on Titanic. So how much did it cost to sail on Titanic? Well, we're looking at the first class parlor suite here. Top notch. There were 2 of those parlor suites on the ship. And that was, you're looking at $100 grand for the parlor suite. But that suite had bedrooms, bathrooms, sitting room, drawing room, a private promenade. All of that was on B deck for you. If you were in another normal first class berth, you're looking at around $3,500 for, this is all in today's money, $3,000 per person for a first class berth. If you're in second class, you're around $1,375 for second class. And in third class, you're looking at an average of $350 to $900 for a third class berth. So I pretty much safe to say that we are probably all around second to third class people. Everything I just showed you, you don't get access to. The second class was not bad. You still had nice beds. You had wood paneling. You had electric, the lights are kind of got some chandeliers and things like that in there. This is the second class dining room. Smaller, not as ornate, but not bad. The ceiling is designed. We got nice lights. We have different style chairs, more cafeteria style, but still a nice area with a piano in the center of the room. And let's go down to third class with the immigrants, with the people coming over. These were not very wealthy at all. These people were class structure system back then, they were on the bottom. And normal places for them to stay would be in those style bunk beds, all steel construction. You would see the plumbing, you would see the ship. Nothing was hidden away at that point. And you were down also with the maids, the crew, the maids that serviced the Guggenheims. They didn't sleep in first class. No, they slept down here in third class. Third class dining room. Very simple, very plain. You can see the side of the ship, the rivets, the bulkheads. It's all visible here. And a third class menu for dinner, you would be seeing rice soup, fresh bread, cabin biscuits, roast beef, brown gravy, sweet corn, boiled potatoes, plum pudding, sweet sauce, and fruit. We eat like the third class eat. We eat today like third class ate. We definitely are not eating oysters every day for dinner. We are definitely having oatmeal porridge and milk for breakfast, ham and eggs, fresh bread, marmalade, tea and coffee. So the third class, we all eat like third class today. So there you go. So here we are, Titanic's last time it would see sunlight. 109 years ago, right now, Titanic sails into destiny. At approximately 9:40 p.m., our time here on Mountain Time is approximately when Titanic struck the iceberg at 11:40 Atlantic time. So if you can stay up till 9:40 tonight, then you would witness 109 years ago Titanic's events, which we are now going into. The Marconi room had a 4-wire antenna that was above the ship, suspended between two masts, 250 feet above the waterline. The equipment was guaranteed to work at 250 miles, but communication could be maintained up to 400 miles in daylight and 2,000 at night. And this was some new technology back then for ships to have a wireless system to send out telegrams, to send out information about iceberg warnings, about where you are, where we are, and the first class passengers definitely made use of it. A lot of messages being sent out to New York. So-and-so wants the private passenger car waiting for them at New York when we arrive, etc., etc. Look at us, we're on the largest ship in the world. So lots of messages are going out. And this is where all those ice warnings are coming in. And of course, the distress signals as well. At 11:40 p.m., Frederick Fleet spots a dark object on the horizon that had just magically appeared in front of them. By the time he rang the bell in the crow's nest 3 times and called the bridge, Murdoch, who was on the bridge at the time at night watch, had seen the iceberg ahead from the bridge. At that point, he had 30 seconds to turn the largest ship in the world. And 30 seconds later, the ship would sideswipe the iceberg just enough as like you could say a cat scratching your arm. It just gently scratched your arm against the ship, the ice against the ship, popping the rivets, buckling the hull. Water starts coming in. Water floods the first 4th and 5th compartment. The 5th compartment is the one that drives it all home. The compartments could fill up the first 4 and the ship would stay afloat. The bow would pull down, but not significant. The 5th compartment fills up and the bulkheads there only go to E deck. So once that happens on the 5th one, water spills to the next one. Water spills to the next one, continuing to pull the bow down, and eventually the bow goes under and there's no saving the ship. So that was their crucial. If they would have just hit 4, they would have been all right. They would have definitely had to be towed into New York at that point. So why didn't they see the iceberg until 30 seconds before colliding? There was no moon. The ocean was dead calm, not a breeze. It was so cold that night. Well, what they didn't know was that they had a false horizon line. A cold water mirage happened. A warm air mass above hits a cold air mass on the ground and creates a mirage effect, creating a false horizon line. So what during the time period, if you could see visually, on your horizon and it was clear and you could see everything, there was no need to slow down. So they kept on going until all of a sudden that iceberg comes out of the mirage. There it is. There's no time to turn. The mirage also distorts light. So any ship on the horizon is not going to be able to read the Morse code lamp that they're sending the flashing SOS out of, because the lights are all shimmering. Just like a summer night in the city, the lights shimmer. Well, the lights don't really shimmer when you look out at the city. That's all heat rays coming off the ground. It's a mirage there. It happens to this day off the coast of Nova Scotia in the dirt during the daylight. Here's a ship on the ocean. The mirage is flipping the ship up, and you're getting two ships. Imagine that at night in the middle of the Atlantic. You don't know what you're looking at. Also, here's another one. The ship's floating. That's because that ship is on the other side of the horizon, and it's being reflected up into the air, and it shows the ship. From where you stand, you can't see that ship, but because of the mirage, you see it. So what happened that night? By 12:05 a.m., 25 minutes after the collision, Captain Smith orders his crew to prepare the lifeboats and requests the wireless operators Harold Bride and Jack Phillips to send CQD and the coordinates of where the ship is. The message CQD was a general call to all vessels, which indicates that the vessel sending is in distress and requires immediate assistance. Harold Bride was the one who suggested, why don't we use the new code SOS as we were sinking? This was the very first time the SOS was used in a disaster for a call for help. By 12:25 a.m., the captain finally realizes the ship is lost and gives the order to start filling the lifeboats. Women and children first were to be called up. The call for help is received by the Cunard liner Carpathia. Unfortunately, she is 4 hours away from Titanic at full speed. It was extremely cold that night. It was extremely loud on the ship before lifeboats were being filled. The boiler rooms had to vent all the steam that was built up, because if water was to hit those boiler pipes full of compressed steam, you would have a boiler explosion. They did not have a boiler explosion because they were able to vent that steam, but it was extremely loud. No one at first class wanted to come out. This was just a hassle. We're going to be back on by morning and we'll be on our way. This is extremely, And finally the steam stopped. People came out and they started lowering the lifeboats. At 12:45, 1 hour after the hit, the first lifeboat is finally lowered, boat 7, it had 12 people on board, 12 women and children, for a boat that could hold 65 grown men. The first distress rocket was also fired at this time. 6 distress rockets, actually 8 were fired between 12:45 and 1:20 a.m. By this time, the water has now reached the nameplate of Titanic. The bow is very slowly dipping down. 400 tons of water is pouring in per minute after the collision with the iceberg. The ship lasted longer than Thomas Andrews predicted. It sank very slowly until the bridge went under, luckily for them. By 2:10 a.m., the last wireless signal was sent out. It read, "We are sinking fast, cannot last much longer." Titanic's distress signal abruptly ends as the radio room loses power. Now, Titanic had a port list. There's a list to the left side, so water filling the ship filled differently than as it showed in James Cameron's film, but Around 2:10 a.m., the forward funnel breaks off at her base. Water is now pouring in to the glass, into the grand staircase. Water comes crashing through the glass dome at this point. And the clock stops at 2:15 a.m. In the next 5 minutes, the entire ship would go. All remaining people, 1,500 of them on the ship, are running for the stern of the ship, try to stay on as long as possible. China, trunks, everything's crashing forward. The people in the lifeboats can hear an ever increasing roar and everything falling forward. The screams, and now they're starting to hear creaks and groans coming from inside the ship. Inside in the engine room right now, there are crew members still down there keeping the turbine running to keep electricity flowing to the lights. They were down there till the very end. Finally, around 2 minutes before she went down, the dimming lights finally flash and go out for the last time. The hull was not designed to take this kind of vertical stress and splits right down the middle. 2 hours and 40 minutes after striking the iceberg, the unsinkable ship slips under the sea at 2:20 a.m. A man in one of the lifeboats looked down at his pocket watch and said, "She's gone, lads." 1,500 people went into the sea that night when she sank. There were 20 boats floating nearby, and only one came back to rescue people from the water. 6 people were safe in the water out of 1,500. So to give you a little demonstration of what happened in a time lapse here, Titanic sideswipes iceberg, Murdoch port rounds the ship, try not to hit the propellers. Water starts to fill those compartments, bringing the bow down. Lifeboats start to be lowered. Very slowly, the ship is starting to be pulled in. She starts having that port list to the left, which actually affects the way she sinks. Water starts coming in on the left side faster than on the right, seen here. Once the bow goes under, she picks up speed. As soon as the water hits the bridge area onto the boat deck, she starts to go down faster and faster. Water hits the base of the forward funnel and she snaps at her base, toppling over. Water is now pouring to the grand staircase. Grand staircase is gone. Ship's going under faster, raising the stern up higher and higher. Can't take the stress, splits between that third and fourth funnel, ripping away. The double bottom hull hangs on, it finally detaches. Boilers start falling out of the stern section. The bow, we have the mast snap back, hitting the bridge, ripping the bridge off. She sinks at a steady stall, and then she picks up speed and continues plunging down straight. Now the stern almost comes vertical, almost, before finally going under. All that compressed air in the back implodes and lets loose, and the deck plates ripping off one by one. The double bottom hull has flown off, has ripped off now to be found in the debris field later. The stern is corkscrewing down. Deck after deck are being ripped off the ship here. Very violent sinking on the stern side here. The bow comes colliding at the ocean floor, plowing in, breaking her back, colliding on the floor. The downblast hits so hard it blows open glass windows on the boat deck. Here comes the stern. About a half a mile away from the bow is where the stern lays on the bottom of the ocean. Just a complete crash site, it looks like. Debris everywhere. And there's the bow and the stern, about a half a mile from each other on the ocean floor. So 20 lifeboats with 700 or so people floating in the middle of the Atlantic from 2:20 a.m. until 4 a.m. when daybreak finally dawns. Carpathia arrives. at the location of Titanic, taking on all that remained of the biggest ship in the world. And these photographs here were taken from Carpathia the morning of April 15th. When Carpathia arrived in New York City a couple days later, everyone was able to get off, inquiries were held, and this photograph was taken of all that remained of the largest ship in the world, were 20 wooden lifeboats. And here at the Discovery Center, we have a template on the floor that you can actually stand, in the lifeboat and see how big these boats were, and I just can't imagine rowing one in the middle of the Atlantic. It must have been very difficult back then. So 73 years later, in 1985, Robert Ballard discovers Titanic, sitting at 12,500 feet below the ocean there, which is about 2.5 miles down. She sat undisturbed for 73 years, 4 months, and 17 days. Now, the map there shows you the path of the ship, the path of the iceberg from Greenland, and where they intersected. The paintings above were done by Ken Marshall, and these were done with photographs taken of the wreck. Of course, you cannot see the whole ship. I mean, you see 30 feet maybe in front of you. It's a thick, dark fog, and there's no light down there. So they took all these photos, and then they wanted Ken Marshall, which is the painter of Titanic, and he's painted her all his life, sinking and sailing, but never of the wreck, because of course we didn't know. So when he painted he painted that picture of a bow, he said that he had to take time away from his painting. He could not finish the painting right away because he was painting the death of a friend that he had known and loved for so long. It was very, very hard for him to paint that first painting there. So what does the ship look like today? So we're looking at the two first top photographs here are of the grand staircase. The light piercing in from above, that would be the glass dome. One of the old chandeliers are still hanging on by its wiring. Honor and Glory and the clock would have been right here where my mouse is. And then the landings all the way down. We found out that there was, the staircase is not at the bottom. It did not rot and fall apart. It actually, the staircase, as I mentioned, is all wood. So it's held in with nail, glue, and gravity. So what happens when you submerge 5 wooden decks underwater? The entire staircase crumbled and floated up as the ship went down and went up to the ocean top there. The windows here on the boat deck, these are the officer quarters. That's where the officers were sleeping. These windows would have been shut at the time of the sinking. They are open now. So the thought is when the ship collided with the bottom of the ocean, the latches must have moved, and then the downblast that hit the ship after it hit the bottom compressed the ship, opening the windows and blowing them open. And that's why they're open today there. The stern section, very hard to tell what it is anymore, except for the very back there. There's the propellers and the mud. The rudder is pretty much all buried, and nothing at all resembles at this point the magnificent ship that it was. And the other photo there is of the Turkish Baths. You remember that video I showed you, the Turkish Baths, beautiful tile and all that. Well, it's still on the wall down in the ship. They were able to get down there and photograph that. So that's why we know what color it was, but it's still there on the wall. Of course, the reception room here. We've got the D-deck reception, beautiful stained glass windows. You know the story, you've seen these photos. Here it is today. The stained glass windows are still intact. And one of the expeditions, they actually were inside just like this, and they had another submersible on the outside of the ship, and they turned on the lights of the submersible, and sunlight shined through. Well, sorry, not sunlight, but submersible electric lights shine through the portholes, illuminating the beautiful stained glass. Here at DCI, we've got lots of artifacts on display. I think 200 of them here, so you can come down and see them. these photos of what I took in Las Vegas at the artifact exhibition there. These are all brought up. We got lead pipe plumbing. So that lead pipes were used back then on the ship. And then the main key feature in Vegas is the big piece. And that is this piece here. It's the side of the ship, a huge hull plate here with the porthole window glass still in. And it's very powerful. When you walk into this room, you see every rivet was touched by a human hand. And someone looked through those portholes. These are sea deck first class cabins. Only one person used that room, used that porthole. So it's very, very moving. And if you ever get a chance, go see the big piece in Las Vegas. That's the closest you're ever going to get to Titanic. Give you wrap this up here. We got 705 people were rescued. These graphs here show you how many people were saved and lost in each class. And first class people lost. Very little women were lost. A lot of them were survived. But third class women, a lot of women were lost. A lot of men were lost. Only 20 third class people were saved out of women. Not a lot. And then how big was the ship? Well, it's 885.5 feet long. What is that? That's 2.5 football fields long. It's 17 stories high with a width of only 93 feet. So it's a tiny ship compared to the Queen Mary II or any ship out there today. But it was the biggest when it was built, largest man-made object in history. And it gives you a perspective of downtown Boise. Take a walk on Capitol from the Basque Center, Basque Block there. Walk down Capitol to Bannock. Now you've walked the length of the ship. The top of the ship, the smokestacks, the height is the top of the Key Bank building there. And it gives you some perspective there. Or the Boise Train Depot. Titanic is smaller than the platform is long. And even though the building is smaller than Titanic, kind of gives you a perspective of how big the ship was on land and things that we know of here today. And the last thing here is the painting of a shore never reached, Titanic entering New York Harbor. So with that, I will throw it back to Emily, and she can get some questions answered here before we let you all go. And actually, before I go, I hope you guys are joining me for the 9 o'clock slot. We have a live YouTube broadcast. We're going to be in the exhibition hall and doing all kinds of great stuff. So I hope I'll see you at 9 o'clock.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eriks. This was amazing. And again, I reiterate what Eriks said. Please come back at 9 o'clock on our YouTube channel to watch him do this live in our galleries. You get to see, we're actually going to be able to open up and let you see one of the uncover the cherub that was on one of the second class staircases. So we're really excited to share this with you tonight. And thank you again for being here. So I do have a couple of questions because we're pretty tight and we have a 9 o'clock show. I'm going to pull out about 2 questions. And if you guys have any other questions that you'd like to send to Eriks, please feel free to email me at education@dcidaho.org, and I'll be happy to pass those along to Eriks. So my first question is, I thought this was really cool because you mentioned that there were about 840 something tons of coal used to run the ship on a daily basis. And so somebody asked a really pretty practical, awesome question is, how large was the area of the ship that was used for coal storage? I mean, it had to be huge. Do you know this?
I can't give you the cubic feet of the ship that was used for. There was a lot of coal bunkers, and they had young men, boys, really, and they were called trimmers. And the trimmer would, with a shovel or a rake, would have to trim the pile of coal in the coal bunker, which was probably dimly lit, full of coal dust. And these boys would rake the coal to keep the ship level. Otherwise, you shovel out too much on one side, ship's gonna tip. But we had, and I didn't mention this, probably 650 tons of coal consumed over a 24-hour period. She carried 6,611 tons of coal. So in between each boiler room, there were huge coal bunkers that span the entire length of the ship as well. So a lot of the ship, and that's why the ships back then were painted black. Well, they're not painted black anymore. Why? Well, we don't have coal. Coal is dusty. So when you loaded the ship, coal was poured through a chute in the side of the ship. would dirty the side of the ship. So you painted the hull black. You wouldn't see the coal dust then. But
That makes total sense. That's awesome. Thank you. And then the last question, and I'm sorry to cut off some of you said some really great ones. So we just have a short time tonight. So the last question I'm going to throw out there for you tonight is, and I think this is a great one because it's something I've always wondered myself, especially after watching the Titanic movie and just seeing considering the kinds of waves that were being made as the ship was going down. Are there any estimates for how far away the lifeboats were from the ships when it sank?
they were scattered around the ship. They rowed away from it, but I don't know, like they didn't get too far. They were all in, they could hear everything that was going on. The captain actually cried out over a megaphone to come back, come back. None of them did. They couldn't get him back. That was one thing that James Cameron had to cut out of his film, was that scene of the captain yelling. But they were all around, and then after the ship sank, they all kind of came together, and then they tried to stay together. And I know by morning, the ocean that was calm as glass had now become choppy. So here you are rowing in a choppy ocean in a giant wooden boat with big wooden oars. And what you see on the Cameron film is actually shot in the real ocean, the Pacific Ocean. And the waves that they're rowing, and that has all been recreated for the film, but was very accurate actually. And a lot of the actors are saying it's really hard to do, to row that. So
I can imagine in frigid waters at the same time, just barely being able to put your hands on those oars. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you again so much, Eric. So this is an incredible experience for us to have you here as a local expert that we can call for help and have here to really help and engage the audience and make this exhibition that we've brought here to the Treasure Valley just that much better and provide people that much better access. So thank you so much. And again, please join us at 9 o'clock on our YouTube channel for a live broadcast in the galleries. And we will see you soon at the Titanic. Please come and see us.